If you have been behind a line of cars in the left-hand lane, you might have wondered if the person at the front of the line was breaking the law. Daryl is asking, is it still a law to not stay in and drive in the fast lane? I've seen more and more people driving in the far left lane and never moving over to the right and causing others to have to pass them on the right side. Well, here's Victor Puente with the answer to that good question.
Well, according to state law, not only is that driver hanging out in the left lane, inconveniencing other drivers, they're also breaking the law. KRS 189.300 says the operator of any vehicle when upon a highway shall travel upon the right side of the highway whenever possible. It then goes on to detail the conditions for passing other vehicles safely. It also says the operator of any vehicle moving slowly upon a highway shall keep his vehicle as closely as practicable to the right-hand boundary of the highway, allowing more swiftly moving vehicles reasonably free passage to the left unless signage or markings indicate otherwise. Now, if you are one of those drivers, you could be fined between $20 and $100. There is a law requiring drivers to move over, or if that's not possible, slow down if they're going by a stopped vehicle with flashers or emergency lights on that's off the side of the road. That law used to only apply to emergency vehicles and highway crews. Was expanded this year to include stranded drivers. If you have a good question, just email us. Goodquestion@WKYT.com. I'll see you on WKYT Mornings.